Christopher watched his grandfather's will get divided like a pie chart. Brandon got the farmhouse, Amanda got the equipment. The aunts and uncles got the savings and cars. His name never came up, not for the 300 acres he'd walked every summer since childhood. Not for the workshop where he'd spent countless hours learning Richard's trade. Not even for a rusted wrench. The other relatives left talking about auction dates and property lines. Christopher sat in that chair. Hands empty, the lawyer approached. "Your grandfather left this for you, one envelope. One sentence inside. The most valuable things a man owns aren't always the things that show up on paper." Christopher drove back to the farm 3 days later to help Brandon catalog equipment for the estate sale in the back of the barn. Under a canvas tarp, the 1898 plow that had broken the first soil on Foster land. Richard had spent every winter maintaining it, polishing metal, oiling joints, treating it like family history made steel. Christopher knelt to examine the base. Something was wrong. The bolts didn't match. Too new, too shiny. His hands found a hidden compartment beneath the frame, inside a brass key, a photograph of people he didn't recognize, and a letter that would change everything he thought he knew about his family. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken promises. Christopher Mitchell sat in the back row, 32 years old, white, brown hair that needed a cut 3 weeks ago, blue eyes, same shade as the man whose will they were about to carve up like a Thanksgiving turkey. Around him, relatives in funeral black. Cousins, aunts, uncles, all wearing the same expression, barely concealed greed wrapped in grief. Brandon Foster, his cousin, older by 3 years, sat front row, already measuring the farmhouse in his head, already counting acres like poker chips. Amanda Foster, Brandon's sister, sharp as her mother's tongue, had a notebook out, actual notes, about a dead man's possessions. The mahogany desk between them and the lawyer might as well have been an altar. Henderson, the attorney, shuffled papers with the solemnity of a priest distributing communion, except this communion was 300 acres of prime Nebraska farmland. A house that had seen 4 generations of Fosters wake up to the same sunrise, and a collection of antique farming equipment worth more than most retirement accounts. Richard Foster had been 87 when he died. Patriarch didn't quite cover it. The man had been a force, quiet, steady, the kind of presence that didn't need volume to fill a room. Christopher had loved him more than he'd loved his own father, which made what happened next feel like a betrayal from beyond the grave. Henderson cleared his throat. The reading began. Legal language that turned a lifetime into bullet points. Brandon got the main farmhouse and half the acreage, 130 acres of black soil that could grow anything if you knew how to listen to it. Amanda received the other half, plus the modern equipment, the new John Deere tractor, the combine harvester that still had that factory smell. Aunt Catherine, Richard's younger sister, 73 and sharp as ever, inherited the stock portfolio, the savings account. Numbers that made her eyes go wide even though she tried to hide it. Uncle Bill received the vintage car collection. 5 cars Richard had spent winters restoring in a heated garage, each one worth more than Bill's house. The bequests kept coming, cousin after cousin, each name called, each inheritance detailed. Christopher sat, waited. His name had to come up, had to. 10 years he'd spent every summer on that farm. From age 8 until he enlisted at 18, Richard had taught him everything. How to drive the old farm haul tractor before his feet could reach the pedals properly. How to read weather patterns in the way clouds moved over the western horizon. How to know when corn was ready by the sound it made in the wind. Stories about the family that went back 5 generations. The original homestead, the first 40 acres that started everything. The springs that fed the creek that watered the valley. Henderson finished reading. Christopher's name hadn't been mentioned. Not once. Not for land. Not for money. Not even for a rusted wrench from the workshop, where they'd spent countless hours rebuilding engines together. The silence in the room pressed against his eardrums, like deep water. Everyone processed what they'd received. What Christopher apparently hadn't, the relatives filed out. Already making plans. Dividing up possessions. Taking ownership before the ink dried. Christopher sat in that chair, alone, trying to understand how a man who'd taught him everything had left him nothing. 10 years of military service had trained him to solve complex problems. Mechanical engineering, Systems thinking. Break it down into components and find the failure point. But this defied analysis. Henderson approached after the room emptied. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, the kind of lawyer who'd seen every variation of family drama Nebraska had to offer. He held out a small envelope. Your grandfather left this for you specifically. Christopher took it. Hands steadier than he felt. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Richard's handwriting. That distinctive slant he'd developed after a tractor accident broke 3 fingers in his left hand back in '73. Son. The most valuable things a man owns aren't always the things that show up on paper. Grandfather, that was it. No explanation. No apology. No hidden instructions. Just one sentence that raised more questions than it answered. Christopher folded the note, slid it into his jacket pocket, walked out into September sunshine that felt too bright for how dark everything had gotten. 3 days passed like molasses. Christopher spent them in his apartment. Small place outside Lincoln, the kind of temporary housing that never quite becomes home. Boxes he still hadn't unpacked from his discharge 4 months ago. The job search had gone nowhere. 3 months of interviews. Engineering firms that wanted someone with civilian experience. Defense contractors who wanted security clearances he no longer had. Family businesses that took one look at his resume and saw overqualified, stamped across it in invisible ink. Sarah had left 2 weeks before the funeral. His girlfriend of 18 months. The relationship had ended over dinner at an Italian place she'd picked. You want to live in the middle of nowhere. I want a future that doesn't involve cow manure and grain silos. Fair point. Couldn't argue with clear incompatibility, except it still felt like another thing Richard's death had taken from him. The timing, the finality, on the 4th day. Brandon called. Chris, I need your help. Christopher almost laughed. The irony was thick enough to cut. With what? The farm. The barn's full of 80 years of accumulated equipment and tools. The auction house wants everything catalogued in 6 weeks. I don't know what half this stuff is. You spent more time out there than any of us. You know grandfather's system. System was generous. Richard's organizational method was part archaeology and part controlled chaos. But yes, Christopher knew it. Knew which tools went where. Which equipment was valuable. Which pieces were museum quality versus which were genuinely just taking up space. The invitation felt like mercy, or maybe pity. Hard to tell which was worse. When do you need me? Saturday. If you can spare the time, spare the time. As if Christopher's calendar was packed with better options. I'll be there. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made Nebraska postcards look honest. Clear sky, temperature in the mid-60s. Just enough breeze to keep the heat from settling. Christopher drove the familiar route. Highway 77 north out of Lincoln. 2-lane county roads that curved around property lines established before cars existed. Past farms he'd known since childhood. The Hendersons' place with the red barn that needed painting. The old Schiefer land now owned by some corporate farming outfit. Then, the turn onto the gravel drive, the Foster place. 300 acres that rolled gently from the road down to the creek valley. The main house sat on a rise. White clapboard, green shutters. A wraparound porch that had hosted 4 generations of Foster family gatherings. Brandon's truck was already parked by the barn. Christopher pulled up beside it, cut the engine. Sat for a moment looking at the workshop. The building where Richard had taught him that every tool had a purpose. Every machine told a story. Every repair was a conversation between the mechanic and the metal. Brandon stepped out of the barn, looked overwhelmed in a way Christopher had never seen on his cousin's usually confident face. Thanks for coming. They shook hands. Awkward. The will reading hung between them like smoke. Let me show you what we're dealing with. The barn was exactly as Christopher remembered. And somehow completely different. Richard's presence had given the space structure, order. Now it just looked like a massive accumulation of rust and possibility. Farm equipment from different eras stacked and stored in every available space. Hand tools hanging on pegboards that covered entire walls. Boxes of spare parts, hardware. Mysterious mechanical components that might be critical or might be trash. No way to know without context. Where do we even start? Christopher looked around. Muscle memory kicking in. He could still hear Richard's voice explaining the layout, the logic, the antique equipment. That's where the real value is. Grandfather had some pieces that collectors would fight over. They spent the morning working methodically. Christopher identifying, Brandon taking notes. Dollar figures that made Brandon's eyes widen. A 1947 Alice Chalmers tractor, fully restored, worth $12,000. A complete set of hand-forged blacksmith tools from the 1890s. Museum quality, $8,000 minimum. Original John Sayre signage. Porcelain, no chips. $1,500 each. The list grew. Brandon kept shaking his head. I thought half this stuff was junk. Grandfather knew what he had. They worked deeper into the barn, toward the back corner, where the oldest pieces lived. The equipment that predated tractors, horse-drawn implements, things that connected the Foster farm to the original homestead, under a canvas tarp that had seen better decades. The prize piece, Christopher pulled the tarp away. Dust swirled in the shaft of sunlight from the high window, an 1898 John Deere plow, the original. The one that had broken the first sod on Foster land. Richard's grandfather, the original Richard Foster, had used this exact plow to turn prairie into farmland. To start everything, Brandon whistled low. Is that what I think it is? The foundation piece. Grandfather considered this more important than the deed to the land. The plow was pristine. Metal worked to a mirror shine. Wood components oiled and maintained. Paint touched up with such care that the age only showed if you knew where to look. Every winter, Richard would spend hours on this plow, disassembling, cleaning, oiling every moving part, reassembling with care, not because he planned to use it, because it represented something. Someone. A man who'd bet everything on 40 acres and a dream. Brandon ran his hand along the curved moldboard. It looks brand new. Grandfather treated it like family history made metal. Christopher knelt. Examining the base where the plow attached to the tractor tongue, something caught his eye. The bolts, they were wrong. Not wrong, exactly, but different, newer, chinier. They didn't match the rest of the hardware, on a piece this carefully maintained. That was deliberate. He leaned closer. The metal base where the plow attached. Someone had modified it. Added a small metal compartment hidden beneath the main frame. Christopher's heart rate picked up. The compartment had a simple latch, but it had been painted to match the rest of the plow so perfectly that it was nearly invisible. Unless you were looking, unless you knew. Richard's words from the note echoed in his head. The most valuable things a man owns aren't always the things that show up on paper. This compartment wasn't accidental. Someone had spent considerable time creating this hiding place, concealing it, preserving it through decades of maintenance. Christopher looked up. Brandon was examining other equipment. Hadn't noticed Christopher's discovery. Something told him. This moment was meant to be private. Part of something larger. Something Richard had carefully constructed. He stood, brushed dust from his knees. Let's break for lunch. Brandon checked his watch. Good call. There's a daily in town. My treat. Least I can do. They drove separately. Met at the Main Street Cafe, a place that had served the same menu since before Christopher was born. Sandwiches, coffee, pie that won state fair ribbons. Brandon talked about the farm, the challenges, the equipment loans coming due, the pressure from agribusiness conglomerates offering to buy. The way modern farming had changed. How hard it was to make the numbers work. Christopher listened. Half his attention on the conversation, half on the secret compartment waiting back in the barn. After lunch, Brandon got a call. Something about rezoning permits. Town council business. He'd be an hour. Maybe 2. You mind heading back on your own? Cataloging what you can. Not a problem. Christopher drove back to the farm. Alone this time. The gravel drive seemed longer. The barn larger. He parked. Walked in. The familiar smell of oil and old wood and metal welcomed him like a handshake from the past. The plow waited where they'd left it. Christopher's hands shook slightly as he worked the hidden latch. The compartment opened smoothly. Well maintained. Like everything Richard touched. Inside, a small waterproof pouch. Wrapped in oiled cloth. Protected. Preserved. Christopher lifted it out. The weight was minimal, but the significance felt heavy enough to bend steel. He unwrapped the cloth. 3 items first. A small brass key on a chain. Old but well cared for. Numbers etched into the metal. 247. Second, a folded piece of paper. Christopher's name on the outside. Richard's handwriting. The same hand that had written the note from the will reading third. A photograph. Christopher held it to the light. Black and white. Faded but clear. Richard as a young man. Early 20s maybe. standing next to a woman Christopher had never seen, both smiling. The woman holding a baby. He turned the photo over, handwriting on the back. Fading ink, Richard, Maggie, and little Rebecca. 1955, Christopher's mind tried to process Maggie. He'd never heard Richard mention anyone named Maggie, Rebecca. No daughter named Rebecca in the family tree. Christopher knew the official history, the story everyone told. Richard married Dorothy in 1958. Their first child, Christopher's father, wasn't born until 1960. But this photo suggested something else entirely. A part of Richard's life no one talked about. A family before the family. A woman named Maggie. A baby named Rebecca. Questions piled up like firewood. Christopher opened the letter. Richard's handwriting. More careful than usual. The kind of penmanship reserved for important documents. Crits. If you're reading this, you found what I hoped you'd find. Some stories are too complicated to tell while people are still living. Too painful to explain. But too important to take to the grave. The key opens safe deposit box 247 at First State Bank in town. George Patterson knows you're coming. He has the second key. What you find there will help you understand why I couldn't put certain things in my will. Why some inheritance can't be divided among lawyers and relatives. The choice of what to do with this information is yours, but I trust you to do what's right. You always understood the farm better than anyone else in the family. Better than my own children sometimes. That understanding, that connection, that's why this responsibility falls to you. Love. Grandfather Richard. Christopher sat on the barn floor, holding artifacts of a secret history. A key that would unlock whatever truth Richard had hidden. A photograph of people who weren't part of the family story he'd grown up with, and a letter that changed everything. Richard hadn't forgotten him in the will. Richard had given him something more complicated than land or money. A mystery. A responsibility. A truth that had been buried for decades. Christopher carefully returned the items to the pouch, closed the compartment, replaced the top. He needed to think. Needed more information before he opened that safe deposit box. One person might know something. Lawrence Cooper, Richard's old friend. The former family attorney who'd retired 3 years ago. If anyone knew about Richard's past, about the parts he'd kept hidden, it would be Lawrence. Christopher drove to the edge of town, where Lawrence lived in a modest craftsman, with a yard that looked like a botanical garden. Lawrence answered on the second knock. 75 years old. Still physically active. Sharp eyes that missed nothing, Christopher. I wondered if you might come by. They sat in the sunroom overlooking vegetable rows that could have fed a small restaurant. Lawrence poured coffee from a French press. Richard told me you might visit. After the will reading, did he tell you why he left me nothing? Lawrence studied him over the rim of his cup. Richard had reasons for everything. He wasn't a man who made decisions lightly, not an answer. But Lawrence had always been careful with words. Christopher pulled out the photograph, slid it across the table. Lawrence picked it up. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, recognition, and sadness. Maggie. I wondered if he'd ever tell anyone about her. The confirmation hit like a physical thing. Who was she? Lawrence set the photo down gently. How much do you know about Richard's time in the military? He served in World War II, Pacific Theater. After that, stationed in California for a few years. He didn't talk about it much. San Diego, 1946 to 1951. That's where he met Margaret Sullivan. Everyone called her Maggie. Teacher on the base, Irish-American, beautiful, kind, smart as anyone Richard ever knew. Lawrence paused, remembering something painful. They fell in love fast. Married in 52. Rebecca was born in 55. Christopher felt the ground shift. What happened to them? Maggie died in a car accident. 1956. Rainy night. Slick roads. A drunk driver crossed the center line. She didn't have a chance. The words landed heavy. Richard was devastated. Still in the service. Committed for another year. Couldn't care for a baby on his own. Not with his duty schedule. Not with his grief. Lawrence refilled his coffee. Hands steady, but something haunted in his eyes. Maggie's parents. Patrick and Kathleen Sullivan. They offered to take Rebecca, raise her until Richard could get established after discharge. It seemed like the best option for everyone, especially for Rebecca. She'd have stability, family who loved her. Why didn't he ever tell anyone? When Richard came back to Nebraska in 57, things were complicated. His father was dying. The farm was struggling financially. He was still broken from losing Maggie. Lawrence looked out at his garden, seeing something Christopher couldn't. The Sullivans had given Rebecca a good home, disrupting her life again, taking her from the only family she'd known. It seemed selfish. So Richard made the hardest decision of his life. He let them adopt her, legally, officially. Patrick and Kathleen became her parents. Richard returned to Nebraska, rebuilt his life, saved the family farm, and met Dorothy a year later, fell in love again, started a new family. But he never forgot Rebecca, never stopped caring. Christopher's understanding of his grandfather was rewriting itself in real time. Why keep it secret? Even after Dorothy died. At first it was too painful. Then as years passed, as he built a life with Dorothy, it seemed unfair to her to reveal this part of his past. By the time Rebecca was grown, by the time your father and his siblings were adults with children of their own, the secret had become too big, too potentially disruptive. Lawrence met Christopher's eyes. Imagine learning your father had a whole other family he never mentioned, a sister you never knew existed. How do you process that? How do you trust someone who kept that kind of secret for 60 years? But he kept track of her, always. He sent money regularly through a trust fund he established. He corresponded with the Sullivans. They sent photos, updates, Rebecca's school achievements, her graduation, her wedding, her children. Lawrence pulled out his phone, scrolled, showed Christopher a recent photo, an older woman, late 60s, dark hair gone silver, standing in what looked like a California garden. Rebecca, Christopher's aunt, his father's half-sister, a whole branch of the family tree no one knew existed. Richard saw something in you, a connection to the land, to history, to things that matter beyond money and property. That's why he left you the key. That's why this burden falls on you now. Christopher pulled the brass key from his pocket, safe deposit box 247. George Patterson has the second key. George and Richard went to school together, served together. If Richard set something up with George, it'll be airtight. What do you think I'll find? Lawrence considered. Everything. Documentation, legal papers, proof, and probably instructions. Richard was thorough. If he's asking you to open that box, he's asking you to decide what happens next, whether to bring this secret into the light. Christopher felt the weight settling onto his shoulders. Why me? Why not his own children? Because they'd see land and money and inheritance law. You see stories, connections, legacy. You understand what Richard was trying to protect. The sun had moved. The light in the sunroom shifted. Everything felt different than it had this morning. Christopher stood. Thank you for being honest. Be careful who you trust with whatever you find. There are people in this town who might not want certain stories coming to light. Even after all these years, a warning. From a man who didn't give warnings lightly. Christopher drove back toward Lincoln. But his mind wasn't on the road. It was on a safe deposit box, a key, a truth that had been waiting 60 years to be discovered. The next morning, Tuesday, Christopher called in sick to a job interview he wasn't excited about anyway. He drove to Cedar Rapids, to First State Bank, a single-story brick building that had stood in the town center since before Richard was born. Inside, the bank had that particular smell. Old paper, metal, the weight of accumulated money and secrets. Christopher approached the receptionist. I need to speak with George Patterson regarding a safe deposit box. Number 247. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition maybe. One moment, she made a call, spoke quietly, hung up. Mr. Patterson will see you. Second door on the left. George Patterson's office was small but organized. The man himself was in his early 80s, full head of white hair, alert blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood to shake Christopher's hand. You look just like your grandfather. At your age, you were expecting me. Richard said you'd come. Eventually. I've been waiting 15 years. Started to wonder if he'd changed his mind. Christopher pulled out the brass key. Box 247. Patterson nodded slowly. Before we proceed, you should know. Richard gave very specific instructions. The contents of that box are for your eyes only. At least initially. When did he set this up? Opened the box in 1990. But he's been adding to it ever since. Last deposit was 3 months before he passed. 3 months. Richard had been preparing. Knowing his time was limited, Patterson led Christopher through a security door. Into the vault area. Rows of safe deposit boxes lined the walls, floor to ceiling, each one a secret. A treasure. A burden. Box 247 sat in the middle section. Patterson inserted his key in one lock. Christopher inserted the brass key in the other. Together they turned. The box unlocked with a satisfying click. Patterson pulled it from its slot, placed it on a private table in a small adjacent room. Take all the time you need, alone with the box. Christopher lifted the lid. Inside, documents, photographs, letters, all meticulously organized. On top, a sealed envelope. Christopher's name. Marked "Read this first" in Richard's handwriting. He opened it, unfolded the letter inside, and began reading the truth his grandfather had kept hidden for 69 years. Dear Chris, if you're reading this, you found my final secret, the one I've carried longest, kept most carefully. I've rehearsed this letter in my mind for decades, never quite found the right words. How do you explain choices made by a younger man, in circumstances you can probably hardly imagine? In 1951, while stationed in San Diego, I met Margaret Sullivan, Maggie. She was intelligent, beautiful, kind, working as a teacher on the base. We fell in love quickly. Married within months. In 1955, Rebecca was born. Those were the happiest days of my young life. Then in 1956, Maggie was killed. Car accident on her way home from work. I was devastated, lost in grief. Still committed to the military for another year. Maggie's parents, the Sullivans, offered to take Rebecca, raise her until I could establish myself after discharge. It seemed like the best option for everyone, especially for Rebecca, who would have stability, family who loved her. But when my service ended, when I returned to Nebraska, I found the farm in trouble, my father ill, the place struggling financially, and I was still a broken man. The Sullivans had given Rebecca a good home. Disrupting her life again seemed selfish. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I agreed to let them adopt her. Legally, I returned to Nebraska, intent on rebuilding my life, saving the family farm. I met Dorothy a year later, fell in love again, started a new family. But I never forgot Rebecca. I sent money regularly through a trust fund, kept track of her life through letters from the Sullivans, who were kind enough to send photos. Updates over the years. Why didn't I tell anyone? At first it was too painful. Then as years passed, as I built a life with Dorothy, it seemed unfair to her to reveal this part of my past. By the time Rebecca was grown, had children, eventually grandchildren, who knew nothing about their half-sister. The secret had become too big, too potentially disruptive to share, but I couldn't bear dying without acknowledging Rebecca somehow. She deserves to know she has family in Nebraska, and you deserve to know about her. If you choose, in this box you'll find everything. Marriage certificate, Rebecca's birth certificate, adoption papers, trust fund documents, correspondence over the years. You'll also find the deed to 40 acres of the original homestead, the heart of the farm, where everything began. This land, legally, belongs to Rebecca, though she doesn't know it yet. Why am I entrusting this to you? Because in all the family, you're the one who truly understands what the farm means beyond its cash value. You see the history, the connection to past and future. You know that land isn't just property. It's a story written over generations. What you do with this information is your choice. Rebecca lives in San Diego now, retired from teaching. She's had a good life, has children and grandchildren of her own. Her contact information is in the folder marked with her name. Whatever you decide, know that I trust your judgment. Some might say I've been a coward, keeping this secret so long. Maybe they're right, but we all make choices we have to live with. We all carry burdens others can't see. I didn't leave you land or money in my will, because I'm leaving you something more important, the truth, and the power to decide what happens to it. I love you, grandson. Always have, Richard. Christopher lowered the letter. Vision blurred. The grandfather he'd thought he knew, the man he'd idolized, had carried this pain, this secret. For 60 years, he began examining the other contents. Marriage certificate. Confirmed. Richard Foster and Margaret Sullivan. Married, San Diego County. June 12, 1952. Birth certificate. Rebecca Foster. Born April 17, 1955. Father, Richard Foster. Mother, Margaret Sullivan Foster. Adoption papers. Dated 1957. Richard relinquishing parental rights to Patrick and Kathleen Sullivan. Trust fund documentation. Monthly deposits since 1957. Nearly $450,000 accumulated over the decades. Dozens of letters between Richard and the Sullivans, spanning 60 years, with photographs, school pictures of Rebecca growing up, Graduation photos, wedding photos, pictures with her own children. Most surprising, a separate deed, 40 acres of the original Foster homestead. The first parcel purchased by Richard's grandfather in 1890, this land, containing the original farmhouse, the family cemetery, had been legally separated from the main farm property decades ago, titled in a separate trust for Rebecca Brennan. Rebecca must have taken her adoptive parents' last name eventually. Sullivan to Brennan, married probably. Christopher sat in that small room, surrounded by the physical evidence of a hidden history, a safe deposit box that had waited 15 years for him to find it, a key that unlocked more than metal, a truth that changed everything he thought he knew about his family, about inheritance, about what it meant to be trusted with someone's deepest secret. Outside that room, the world continued. Banks processed transactions, people deposited checks. Life moved forward, but in here, time had stopped in 1956 and started again the moment Christopher opened this box. Christopher sat in his truck outside First State Bank, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The copied documents filled his backpack. Patterson had prepared duplicates years ago, updated regularly, waiting for this exact moment. His phone buzzed. "Brandon, where'd you disappear to?" "Still need help with the catalog." "Right. The barn. The auction. The life that existed before Christopher discovered his grandfather had a secret daughter and 40 acres no one knew about. Something came up. Family thing. I'll explain later. Everything okay?" No. Nothing was okay. Everything had tilted off its axis. "Yeah. Just need a day." He ended the call before Brandon could ask more questions. Rebecca Brennan's phone number sat in his contacts now, transferred from the papers in the safe deposit box, a California area code. San Diego, where Richard had met Maggie, where Rebecca still lived. 69 years old now, a retired teacher, with children and grandchildren of her own. Christopher's aunt, his father's half-sister. A woman who'd grown up knowing her biological father existed somewhere, but never really knowing him. His finger hovered over the call button. "What do you even say?" "I'm your nephew. The one you didn't know existed. Grandfather Richard died 3 weeks ago and left me a roadmap to a family you never knew existed." "No, hello. This is going to sound insane, but your birth father kept detailed records of your life in a safe deposit box for 60 years, and now I'm supposed to decide what to do about it." Worse, Christopher set the phone down, started driving, not back to Lincoln, not to the farm. Now where? Just driving. The Nebraska landscape rolled past, flat fields waiting for harvest, the occasional farmhouse, grain silos that marked small towns like lighthouses. His mind kept circling back to one question: why keep it secret this long? Lawrence's explanation made sense on the surface. Then time. Then the secret getting too big to unpack. But 60 years. 60 years of sending money to a trust fund, receiving letters and photos, watching Rebecca grow up through snapshots and updates, never claiming her, never telling his own children they had a sister. Christopher's phone rang again, non-roll number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello," a man's voice. Smooth. "Professional, Mr. Mitchell. This is Douglas Whitfield, president of First State Bank. I understand you visited us this morning." Christopher's grip tightened on the wheel. "That's right. I hope everything was in order. George Patterson mentioned you accessed a long-dormant box. Sometimes older trusts and property deeds can be quite complex. We'd be happy to have our legal team review the documents, ensure everything is current and valid." Warning bells. "How did you know what was in the box?" A pause. Slight. "But there, I didn't mean to imply. Just, when properties are changing hands, especially valuable farmland, we like to make sure all documentation is properly recorded. I'll keep that in mind. I should also mention, I understand Horizon Development has expressed interest in the Foster property. Older trusts sometimes contain provisions that can complicate sales. If there's anything that might affect the transaction, our bank would be obligated to ensure all parties are properly informed." There it was, Horizon Development, the company Brandon had mentioned, offering to buy the farm. And somehow, the bank president knew about the safe deposit box visit within hours. I appreciate the concern, but these are private family matters, of course. Just offering our services. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. The line went dead. Christopher pulled over, heart racing. Whitfield wasn't making a friendly offer. He was fishing, probing. trying to determine if Christopher had found something that could interfere with a development deal, which meant Whitfield knew, or suspected, that Richard had separated property, hidden assets. But how Christopher called Lawrence? Something's wrong. Bank president just called me, asking about the safe deposit box. Mentioned Horizon Development. Lawrence's response came quick. Tense, Douglas Whitfield is on Horizon's local advisory board. Has been for 2 years. They've been trying to buy the Foster Place for a resort development. Golf course. Luxury accommodations. They need the full 300 acres, especially the water rights. Water rights. Christopher's mind flashed to the documents in his backpack. The separate deed for 40 acres. 40 acres that included the springs, the creek headwaters, the main water source for the entire property, the 40 acres Richard set aside. They're not just historically significant, no. They control the aquifer access. Whoever owns that land, owns the water, and in drought years, whoever controls the aquifer controls every farm downstream. Brandon doesn't know about the water, or about Rebecca either. Lawrence exhaled slowly. Then you have a decision to make. Soon. Because if Horizon figures out those 40 acres aren't part of Brandon's inheritance, they'll move fast, either to acquire them separately, or to sink the whole deal. Christopher ended the call, sat in silence. The September afternoon sun slanted through the windshield. Everything looked normal. Fields, sky, road. But underneath, pressure building. He pulled out his phone, dialed Rebecca's number before he could overthink it. 3 rings, 4. A woman's voice answered, warm but cautious. Hello. Rebecca Brennan. Yes. Christopher's mouth went dry. My name is Christopher Mitchell. I'm Richard Foster's grandson. I believe he was your biological father. Silence. Long enough that Christopher thought the connection had dropped then. A soft intake of breath. I've been waiting for this call for 30 years. Christopher, I just didn't know which of Richard's grandchildren would eventually make it. The calmness in her voice. The certainty. You knew about us, of course. Richard showed me photos every time we met. He was so proud of all of you. Especially you. He said you were the one who truly understood the farm. Christopher had to pull over again. Process this, we had no idea about you. I only found out 3 days ago, I know. That was our agreement. Richard's, Dorothy's, and mine. We decided long ago that bringing our worlds together while everyone was still alive would only create unnecessary pain. Dorothy knew about you. Rebecca's voice softened. Since 1980. She found some letters from my adoptive parents. Instead of confronting Richard with anger, she reached out to me privately. We met once. Just the two of us. She was an extraordinary woman. Your grandmother. Christopher felt like the ground beneath his feet kept shifting. Every revelation changed the landscape. Why didn't they tell us? After. I mean, the longer a secret is kept, the harder it becomes to reveal. By the time I found Richard in the early 90s, he and Dorothy had built an entire life together. They had adult children. Grandchildren they adored. Revealing my existence would have forced everyone to re-examine decades of family history, so you and Richard met. In secret, after Dorothy passed in 2005. Yes, a few times a year, he'd visit California. Supposedly fishing trips with old army buddies. We'd spend a few days together, getting to know each other. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Christopher pulled the photograph from his pocket, the one from the Plow compartment. Richard and Maggie and baby Rebecca. There's more to this situation than just family history. Richard left you 40 acres of the farm, in a trust, the original homestead. But he never told you. Now Rebecca sounded surprised. I had no idea Richard left me any part of the farm. He never mentioned it during our visits. It's not just any 40 acres. It's sitting on top of the county's largest aquifer, which makes it extremely valuable. My cousin Brandon is trying to sell the entire farm to a development company. But he doesn't know those 40 acres legal belong to you. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. I don't need the money, Christopher. I had a good career. My late husband left me well provided for. It's not just about money. This development company, Horizon, they want to build a luxury resort. They're pressuring the town with promises of jobs and tax revenue. But controlling that water could give them power over the entire region long term. Richard always said the land's value wasn't in the soil. It was in what ran beneath it. There's something else. Your granddaughter, Catherine. The one studying at University of Nebraska. How do you know about Catherine? I found a letter you wrote to Richard, mentioning her. She's studying sustainable agriculture. Her research might help us find an alternative to selling to Horizon. Rebecca's voice carried something new. Interest. Hope maybe. Catherine would love to talk about sustainable farming practices. It's practically all she discusses these days. I could call her. Say a family friend's grandson is interested in her research. That would be perfect after they ended the call. Christopher sat with the phone processing. Rebecca had known about them for 30 years, had met Dorothy, had visited Richard after Dorothy died, a secret relationship maintained for decades, while Christopher and his father and all the cousins lived their lives. Completely unaware. And Catherine, Rebecca's granddaughter, Christopher's second cousin, 28 years old. Studying the exact type of agriculture Richard had spent his life practicing. The connections had felt too precise to be coincidence. Richard had been stacking dominoes for 60 years. Now they were finally falling in the right direction. 3 days later, Christopher drove to Lincoln. University of Nebraska campus, the agricultural quad hummed with activity. Students moving between modern glass buildings and experimental growing fields. Catherine Morgan waited outside the Sustainable Agriculture building. Exactly as Rebecca had described, 28, white. Light brown hair pulled back, jeans, boots. Flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, not a grad student, a doctoral candidate. With 3 published papers on integrating traditional farming knowledge with modern sustainability practices. She spotted Christopher. Waved, "You must be Christopher." Grandma Rebecca said, "You're interested in my work." They walked to a campus coffee shop. Catherine immediately launched into passionate explanations of her research. Soil ecosystems, water conservation, natural pest management. Most people don't understand that soil isn't just dirt, it's a living ecosystem. Industrial farming treats it like an inert medium. But traditional family farms often develop practices that naturally preserve soil health without even realizing the science behind it. Christopher thought of Richard, the crop rotation, the refusal to use certain chemical fertilizers. My grandfather was obsessive about letting fields rest. He said the land needed to breathe. Catherine's eyes lit up. Smart man. Those older farmers often had generational knowledge that science is only now catching up to. They understood their specific land in ways no textbook could teach, she continued, describing research on tourism integration, farm-to-table dining, educational programs. People will pay premium prices for authentic rural experiences if done well. It creates a revenue stream that doesn't depend entirely on crop yields and market prices. That sounds like it could be a viable alternative to selling farmland for development. Catherine's expression darkened. Absolutely. I've seen too many family farms sold off for subdivisions or commercial development. Once that agricultural heritage is gone, it's gone forever. Christopher leaned forward. What if you had a chance to apply these ideas to a real farm? A historic property that's at risk of being sold to developers? I'd love that opportunity. My dissertation requires a real-world application component. The farm I'm thinking of is about 300 acres in Cedar County. Been in the same family for 4 generations. It has historic buildings, antique farm equipment, and importantly, its own water source. Catherine set down her coffee. Sounds ideal. Is this your family's farm? My grandfather passed away recently. My cousin inherited most of it. He's considering selling to a resort developer. The most valuable part might be 40 acres that contain the original homestead and the farm's water source. It sits on top of a significant aquifer. Whoever controls the aquifer controls every farm downstream, especially with climate change. Water rights are becoming the most valuable asset in agricultural communities. For the next hour, Catherine outlined how a historic farm could be transformed into a sustainable agricultural center, educational programs, tourism components, working demonstration fields. Her vision was practical yet innovative. Preserving the essential character while making it economically viable. This isn't just theory. There are successful models throughout the Midwest with the right business plan. Perhaps some grant funding for historical preservation. It could work. Christopher was impressed. Not just by her knowledge, by her practical approach. This wasn't naive idealism. Catherine understood economic realities, had developed workable solutions. Would you be interested in seeing the farm sometime? Your expertise could be valuable in developing an alternative proposal. I'd love that. My schedule is flexible on weekends. as they parted ways. Christopher felt something shift, a possibility forming. Catherine's vision for the farm aligned with what he believed Richard would have wanted: preservation of the legacy while adapting to modern realities, not just stopping Horizon's development. Creating something meaningful that honored the past while securing the future. But first, he needed to address the legal reality of the 40 acres belonging to Rebecca. His phone buzzed. Text from Brandon: need to talk ASAP. Horizon pushing to close next week. Bank threatening foreclosure if deal falls through. Situation is serious. Christopher called him. What's going on? Brandon's voice carried an edge Christopher hadn't heard before. Desperation. I'm leveraged to the hilt. Took out loans to modernize my portion of the operation, thinking I'd grow my way out of debt. Then grain prices dropped. Now I'm underwater. Way underwater. How bad if this Horizon deal doesn't close? First state forecloses in 30 days. I lose everything. Not just the farm, this house, my savings. All of it. Christopher's mind raced. Whitfield, the bank president, who sat on Horizon's advisory board. When did you take out these loans? 2 years ago. Whitfield approved them personally. Said agricultural modernization was a smart investment. Of course he did, setting Brandon up. Creating leverage. Ensuring he'd be desperate enough to sell when Horizon made their offer. Brandon, we need to talk. In person. About the farm. About some things I found. What things? Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? At the old homestead. The old. Why there? Just trust me. Silence. Then. Fine. 10 a.m. Christopher hung up, looked at his calendar. Tomorrow he'd have to tell Brandon that 40 acres of the farm belonged to their grandfather's secret daughter. That the water rights everyone assumed came with the property didn't. That the Horizon deal was built on false assumptions. And somehow convince him not to lose his mind. No pressure. That evening, Christopher drove back to the farm. Not to the main house, but to the old homestead, the place Lawrence had mentioned, where Richard had spent the last years visiting. Thinking the access road was hidden, barely more than 2 tire tracks through trees. Leading to the original 40 acres, the homestead sat in a small valley. Creek running through. Springs bubbling up. Cottonwood trees that had been saplings when Richard's grandfather first arrived. A 2-story farmhouse. Weathered but structurally sound. Built in 1890, Christopher had been here once as a kid. Richard had brought him. Told him stories about the first Fosters. But they'd never stayed long. Now he understood why. This place was separate. Sacred somehow. The heart Richard had protected by keeping it hidden. Inside, the house was furnished. Simple, rustic. But maintained. Not a museum. A functional space that had been preserved with care, in what must have been Richard's study. Christopher found bookshelves filled with agricultural journals, history books, family albums. On the desk, a leather-bound journal. Richard's handwriting filled the pages. Observations about the farm, weather patterns, wildlife. Personal reflections stretching back decades. The final entry, dated just weeks before Richard's death. Walked the creek line this morning. Water running clear and strong despite the dry summer. This land has always provided. Even in difficult times. I hope whoever comes after me will understand what we have here. Not just soil and water, but a legacy of stewardship. Some things are worth more than money. Worth fighting to preserve for those who will come long after we're gone. I've done what I can to protect this place. Now I must trust that the right person will find the path I've left. And have the courage to follow it. Christopher closed the journal, more certain than ever that Richard had intended him to find the hidden key. To discover Rebecca. To understand the true value of these 40 acres. This wasn't just about family secrets or legal ownership. About protecting something precious Richard had preserved for future generations. He spent the night in the old homestead. In a room that might have been Richard's when he visited. Thinking about tomorrow. About Brandon, who needed money desperately. About Rebecca, who owned land she didn't know existed. About Catherine, who had a vision for saving it all. About Horizon, who wanted to control the water, the future. About 40 acres that held more value than anyone realized. Morning came too fast. Christopher made coffee in the farmhouse kitchen. Watched sunrise through windows that had framed the same view for over a century. At 9:30, he heard a vehicle. Brandon's truck appeared through the trees. His cousin climbed out. Looked around. I haven't been out here since I was a kid. Forgot how remote it is. They walked the property. Christopher showing him the springs, the creek, the original farmhouse. Why'd you want to meet here? Christopher stopped by the creek, where water bubbled up clear and cold. Because this is the center of everything. The reason your Horizon deal can't work. Not the way you think. Brandon's expression shifted. Guarded. What are you talking about? Richard left these 40 acres, this exact parcel, in a separate trust. Decades ago. They're not legally part of the estate you inherited. Color drained from Brandon's face. That's impossible. The whole 300 acres were listed in the estate inventory. 260 acres were in the estate. These 40, the ones containing the homestead and the main water source, were placed in a separate trust long before Richard died. Who owns them? Christopher pulled out the documentation. Handed it over. Richard Foster had another family before he met Dorothy, a wife named Margaret Sullivan. She died in a car accident in 1956. Their daughter, Rebecca, was raised by her maternal grandparents. Richard let them adopt her legally. Brandon stared at the papers. Birth certificate, marriage license, adoption documents. I don't. How is this possible? Richard kept it secret. From everyone. Dorothy eventually found out. They agreed to keep it private. To protect both families, and these 40 acres belonged to Rebecca Brennan, Richard's firstborn. Our aunt, who none of us knew existed. Brandon sat heavily on a weathered log, the Horizon deal. They need the full 300 acres, especially the water rights. Without these 40 acres, the resort isn't viable. Correct. Brandon's hands shook as he held the papers. I'm ruined. Completely ruined. Whitfield will foreclose. I'll lose everything. Unless we find another way. What other way? What possible way out is there? Christopher sat beside him. I met Rebecca's granddaughter, Catherine. She's a doctoral candidate in sustainable agriculture at Nebraska. She has ideas, practical ideas, for making the farm economically viable while preserving its character. Brandon laughed. Bitter, a doctoral student is going to solve this with theories and good intentions. That's your plan. She's not a grad student. She's a doctoral candidate with published research and real-world consulting experience. And her ideas aren't theories. They're based on successful models from other historic farms. And how exactly does this help me? When I have loans due in 30 days, the most valuable asset here is the water rights. There may be ways to monetize those without selling them outright. Conservation easements, water banking programs. These could generate upfront capital while maintaining long-term control. Brandon stood. Paced, you're asking me to trust everything to someone I've never met, based on research I haven't seen. While my financial life is imploding, I'm asking you to give the alternative a chance. Before committing to Horizon, do you have any idea what you're asking? What's at stake for me? Christopher stood, faced his cousin. I know you're desperate. I know you feel trapped. But selling to Horizon doesn't just affect you. It affects the entire watershed. Every farm that depends on this water. The town. The future. Easy to say when it's not your name on the foreclosure notice. Fair point. Christopher pulled out his phone. Called Catherine. Can you come to Cedar County today? I need you to see something. She could. She would. And everything was about to change. 2 hours later, her practical sedan appeared on the access road. Catherine climbed out, took one look at the valley, the springs, the farmhouse. This is incredible. Brandon watched, skeptical, as she examined everything with a trained eye, asking questions about soil quality, water flow patterns, growing seasons, not just looking, observing. Inside the farmhouse, she ran her hand along worn wooden countertops. This place feels lived in, not like a museum. Someone cared for it. My grandfather spent a lot of time here. Catherine pulled out a notebook, started sketching. This is exactly the kind of property people would pay to experience. Authentic, historical. With a story to tell, she explained her vision. The old homestead as the centerpiece, restored but not modernized. A place where people could disconnect from technology, reconnect with the rhythms of rural life. The main farm continuing production, but transitioning toward organic practices, heritage crops that commanded premium prices, farm-to-table dining, workshops on traditional skills, seasonal festivals, agricultural tourism that wasn't just trendy concepts, but sustainable revenue for family farms across the country. Brandon listened, still skeptical, but something shifting in his expression. Catherine addressed him directly. The key difference between this approach and the Horizon deal. This keeps control of the most valuable assets, the land and water rights, within the family. While still generating the capital, you need to address your immediate financial situation. The immediate situation being that I'm facing foreclosure in 30 days. The conservation easement alone could generate enough capital within 45 to 60 days to clear those debts. It's not as immediate as the Horizon payout, but it's a solution that doesn't require selling the land outright. She showed him projections, case studies, funding sources. The numbers were encouraging, not a quick fix, but a sustainable long-term approach that could begin generating revenue within months. Brandon studied the documents. This would require what kind of initial investment? Catherine outlined startup costs, grant opportunities, timeline for phased development, with the property's history and water resources. It would qualify for several preservation and sustainability programs. And Rebecca, this woman who legally owns the 40 acres. She's on board with this. I haven't asked her yet. But based on our conversation, I believe she'd be open to working together, rather than claiming her property and walking away. Brandon rubbed his face. This is insane. All of it. Secret relatives, hidden land trusts, conservation easements. I just wanted to save my farm. You still can. Just differently than you planned. He looked at Christopher. You really think this can work? I think it's worth trying. Before burning everything down for a one-time payout. After a long moment, Brandon nodded slowly. Fine. Bring your alternative plan. Develop it properly. Show me real numbers. If it's viable, if it addresses my debt, I'll consider it. But I'm not canceling my meeting with Horizon. They need to know about these complications. Christopher felt relief. Small, but real. Fair enough. As Catherine prepared to leave, she pulled Christopher aside. There's something I should tell you. About my grandmother. About Rebecca. What, she's coming to Nebraska. Week after next, she wants to meet you. And she wants to see this land. She does. 69 years. And she's never set foot on the property her father spent his life protecting. Never walked the ground where her biological family built their legacy. Catherine's voice carried emotion Christopher hadn't heard before. She deserves to see it, don't you think? Before we decide what happens to it, Christopher looked back at the homestead, the valley, the springs, imagining Rebecca. Seeing this for the first time, connecting with a heritage she'd been separated from since infancy. Yes, she deserves that. After Catherine left, Brandon lingered. I need to ask, why you? Why did Richard leave this to you instead of my father, or Aunt Catherine, or anyone else? Christopher had wondered the same thing, I think, because I listened when he talked about the farm, about what it meant. The others saw land, assets. I saw stories, connections, legacy, and he thought you'd protect it. He thought I'd understand what needed protecting. Brandon kicked at a loose stone. You know what the worst part is. He was probably right. They stood in silence. Two cousins, one farm, generations of history, and a secret that had waited 60 years to reshape everything. 3 weeks passed. Catherine worked 16-hour days on the business plan. Financial projections, grant applications, implementation timeline. Christopher coordinated. Between Rebecca in California, Catherine in Lincoln, Brandon at the farm, Lawrence providing legal counsel, Sheriff Timothy Garrett quietly ran interference with local officials who kept asking uncomfortable questions about property transfers. And through it all, Douglas Whitfield circled, calling Brandon daily, pressure mounting, interest rates, foreclosure timelines, legal obligations, week 2. Rebecca called. I got a call from the county assessor's office. Someone requested a full title search on the 40 acres. Filed under an LLC I don't recognize, Horizon. Moving behind the scenes. How long until Catherine's plan is ready? Give me 4 more days. I can have preliminary numbers by Wednesday. We might not have 4 days. Rebecca's voice hardened. Then we present what we have. Better incomplete truth than polished lies. Wednesday arrived. Catherine delivered a preliminary business plan. Not perfect, but credible. Showing viable alternatives to the Horizon deal. Thursday morning. Christopher woke to his phone exploding. Texts, calls, emails. Brandon. Frantic town council meeting moved tonight. Emergency session. Horizon zoning variance. They're voting tonight. Christopher called him. I know. We're preparing. Preparing what? Chris, I don't have a choice anymore. The bank sent foreclosure notice this morning. 30 days, if Horizon backs out because of this council vote. I'm finished. The conservation easement funding. It's approved. Pending. Pending isn't cash in hand. It will be. 45 days. I don't have 45 days. Brandon's voice cracked. Christopher had never heard his cousin sound like this. Broken. What if I could get you a bridge loan? Private funding. Just enough to stop the foreclosure clock. From who? My credit is destroyed. No bank will touch me, not a bank. Rebecca. Silence. The secret daughter who owns 40 acres is going to loan me money to save the farm. She's family. Brandon. Whether you knew about her or not. More silence. Then this is insane. All of it. But, yeah, okay. If she's willing, I'll take it. Christopher called Rebecca. Explained the situation. Her response was immediate. How much does he need? Enough to cover 3 months of loan payments. Maybe 50,000. I'll wire it today. You don't even know him. He's Richard's grandson. That's enough. By noon. The wire transfer hit Brandon's account by 1 p.m. Brandon had suspended foreclosure proceedings by 2 p.m. Whitfield called Christopher directly. You're making a serious mistake, interfering with this development. There are consequences. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Horizon has invested millions in preliminary work. They're not going to walk away quietly. Then they should have done proper title research before investing. Whitfield's voice went cold. The council meeting is at 6. I suggest you prepare for disappointment. Saturday morning. 2 days before the council meeting, Christopher and Catherine drove to Lincoln Airport. Rebecca emerged from the gate, late 60s. Silver-streaked dark hair, dignified bearing, white, Irish heritage visible in her bone structure. She looked so much like Richard it hurt. Same eyes. Same way of standing. Like someone who knew exactly who they were. Catherine reached her first. Embrace. Tears neither tried to hide. Then Rebecca turned to Christopher, studied his face with an intensity that made him feel transparent. You have his eyes. And that same way of looking at things. Like you're seeing more than what's on the surface. Welcome home, the words slipped out. Unplanned. But Rebecca's expression softened. Home. Yes, I suppose it is. They drove to Cedar County, taking the scenic route. Rebecca watching the landscape with hunger, drinking it in farmland, rolling fields, grain silos against blue sky. He described all of this every time we met. The way light hits the corn in late afternoon. How the wind sounds different depending on the season, I thought. Maybe he was romanticizing, remembering better than it was. Catherine reached back, squeezed her grandmother's hand. He wasn't. The access road to the homestead. Hidden. Rough. Winding through trees that had witnessed over a century of foster history. Then, the valley. Becca gasped. Springs bubbling. Creek flowing. Cottonwood trees ancient and protective. The farmhouse weathered but standing. Exactly as Richard had maintained it. Christopher stopped the truck. Let her take it in. She stepped out. Stood perfectly still. He sent me photos. Over the years. But this. Being here. Her voice cracked. Catherine went to her. Arm around her shoulders, they walked the property together. Rebecca touching everything. The farmhouse porch, the barn's rough wood, the spring water inside the house. She moved through rooms like a pilgrim in a shrine, found Richard's study. His journal still on the desk, opened it. Traced her fingers over his handwriting. I have letters, hundreds of them. But this, his daily thoughts. The things he never shared. Christopher gave her space. Let her discover. Catherine pulled him aside. She needs time. Let's walk the property line. Show you something I noticed last visit. They hiked to the eastern boundary, where the 40 acres met Brandon's inherited land. Catherine pointed to survey markers. Faded, but still visible. These haven't been updated since 1895. If Brandon's selling, the legal description in his deed might overlap with Rebecca's trust property. Just slightly. Maybe 3 acres, meaning any title search by Horizon will flag a boundary dispute, which gives us leverage. They can't close until it's resolved, which buys us time. Christopher shook his head. Richard planned this, didn't he? Even the survey markers. Kept them ambiguous on purpose. Richard had been stacking dominoes for 60 years. Now they're finally falling in the right direction. They returned to find Rebecca sitting on the farmhouse porch. Journal in her lap. She looked up. He wrote about you. In here. Christopher said you were the only one who asked questions about the why, not just the how. Said you understood that land remembers. Land remembers. Who cared for it? Who didn't? He said soil has memory. Ecosystems retain imprints of how they've been treated. Catherine nodded. Indigenous agricultural knowledge has understood that for centuries. Western science is just catching up. They sat together. 3 generations connected by a man who'd kept them separated. Until now, Rebecca closed the journal. Catherine showed me your alternative plan. The Sustainable Agricultural Center. Educational programs. Heritage preservation. What do you think? I think Richard would have loved it. Would have fought for it. She paused. But I also think Brandon is terrified. And desperate people don't always make rational choices. He agreed to look at the numbers. Looking and accepting are different things. Rebecca's expression turned serious. There's something else. Something Catherine and I discussed. We think you should know before the town council meeting. What? Catherine pulled out her phone. Showed him an email. Cedar County Council. Emergency session. Monday evening. Topic: Horizon Development Zoning Variance Request. They moved it up. Was scheduled for next month. Now it's tomorrow night. Christopher felt cold. Whitfield has to be. He knows we're developing alternatives. Wants to force Brandon's hand before we're ready. Rebecca stood. Then we need to be ready anyway. Even if it's imperfect, even if the numbers aren't final. We need to present a credible alternative. Make the council pause. You're staying for this. I've hidden for 69 years. Stayed silent while Richard protected me. Protected this land. Time to step into the light. Catherine's eyes widened. Grandma. If you reveal yourself at a public meeting, everyone will know. The whole town, the whole family. Good. Secrets have done enough damage. Monday evening. October chill in the air. The Cedar County Courthouse. Built 1905. Stone and gravity by 5:30. The council chamber was packed. Business owners, farmers, town residents, Horizon representatives in expensive suits. Whitfield in the front row. Confident, Christopher, Rebecca, Catherine, Brandon, and Lawrence entered together. The unified entrance drew stares. Whispers. Brandon looked sick. Rebecca composed. Catherine determined. Sheriff Garrett nodded from his position by the door. Mayor Jenkins called the meeting to order. We're here to consider Horizon Development's variance request for the proposed Cedar Valley Resort. This would allow commercial development on agricultural land currently zoned for farming only. Whitfield stood. Smooth, Mayor. Council members. Horizon Development represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Cedar County. Economic revitalization, jobs, tax revenue, progress. He clicked through a presentation. Slick graphics, projected revenue. Employment numbers: 125 jobs, 20 million annual economic impact, state-of-the-art facilities. The alternative is watching our young people leave. Our farms fail. Our communities decline. This is our chance to secure our future. Applause from the business owners then. Whitfield's coup de grace. We have commitments from the major landowners, including Brandon Foster, who controls the critical water access parcels. This project is shovel-ready. Pending only your approval. All eyes turned to Brandon, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mayor Jenkins checked his notes. Is there opposition testimony? Rebecca stood. The room's energy shifted. Nobody knew her. But something in her bearing commanded attention. My name is Rebecca Brennan, and I'm here to tell you a story about land, water, and the lies we inherit. Christopher's heart hammered. She was really doing this. I was born Rebecca Foster. In 1955, in San Diego, my father was Richard Foster. My mother was Margaret Sullivan. She died when I was 14 months old. I was raised by my maternal grandparents. The Sullivans. Gasps rippled through the room. Brandon's head snapped up. Rebecca continued. Voice steady. Richard Foster couldn't raise an infant alone while serving in the military. The Sullivans offered to care for me. What started as temporary became permanent. A legal adoption. Richard returned to Nebraska, rebuilt his life, met Dorothy, started a new family. Murmurs intensified, but he never forgot me, never stopped caring. He sent money, kept track of my life, and decades ago, he set aside 40 acres of the original Foster homestead in a legal trust. For me, she pulled out documents, held them high. These 40 acres include the springs, the creek headwaters, the primary water access for what Mr. Whitfield claims Brandon Foster controls. Whitfield shot to his feet. This is absurd. A woman nobody's ever heard of, claiming property based on ancient paperwork. The Foster estate was thoroughly probated. Lawrence stood. Calm. The estate was probated. Correctly. 260 acres went to Brandon and Amanda Foster. 40 acres were never part of the estate. They've been held in a separate irrevocable trust since 1973. all properly recorded with the county, all legal and binding. He distributed copies of the trust documents, the deed, the survey. Council members examined them. Confusion. Concern. Mayor Jenkins looked at Whitfield. Did Horizon's title search reveal this encumbrance? Whitfield's jaw tightened. We were assured all property interests were included in the Foster estate. By whom? By the family attorney at the time. Lawrence smiled. Thin. That would have been me. And I never made such assurances. Because I knew they'd be false, the room erupted. Whitfield trying to regain control. Council members arguing. Business owners shouting questions. Mayor Jenkins gavelled for order. This is highly irregular. If there's a legitimate title dispute, this council cannot approve a variance on property with clouded ownership. There's no dispute. Just documentation that wasn't disclosed. We can resolve this quickly. Whitfield was scrambling now. Catherine stood, actually. There's more you should know. She approached the council table. Handed out her preliminary business plan. My name is Catherine Morgan. I'm a doctoral candidate in sustainable agriculture at the University of Nebraska. And I'm Rebecca Brennan's granddaughter. More gasps. I've spent the last 3 weeks developing an alternative development proposal for the Foster farm, one that preserves its agricultural character, creates sustainable jobs, and protects the watershed. She clicked through her own presentation. The Heritage Agricultural Center would create 38 full-time positions within 2 years, all prioritizing local hiring, living wages, year-round employment not dependent on tourist seasons. Her slides showed successful comparable projects, revenue models, grant funding sources. More importantly, this approach keeps the water rights in local hands, subject to county oversight, rather than controlled by a corporation whose primary obligation is to shareholders. Not to this community. A farmer stood, elderly, weathered. I've worked land adjacent to the Foster place for 60 years. That spring water feeds creeks running through a dozen farms. If a resort controls it, who gets priority in drought years? Other farmers nodded, voiced similar concerns. The conversation shifted from abstract economic projections to concrete questions about resource allocation, power. Future council member Martinez, who'd been silent, spoke. Mr. Whitfield, your economic impact statement projects 125 jobs. How many would be filled locally versus relocated from other Horizon properties? Whitfield hedged. Industry standards. Competitive compensation. We'd certainly prioritize local candidates where qualified. That's not an answer. Management positions require specific expertise. We'd likely bring in experienced resort staff, so the high-paying jobs go to outsiders, and locals get housekeeping and groundskeeping. Whitfield's composure cracked. That's a gross oversimplification. Martinez turned to Catherine. And your employment projections? Catherine provided detailed breakdowns. Position types, required qualifications, salary ranges, training partnerships with the community college. The goal is creating career paths, not just jobs. The debate continued. Nearly 2 hours. Business owners defending Horizon, farmers questioning water control, environmentalists raising sustainability concerns. Brandon sat through it, silent, processing. Finally, Mayor Jenkins called for the vote. All in favor of granting Horizon Development's variance request. 4 hands opposed, 5 hands. The variance failed. Whitfield's face went dark. He gathered his materials, stormed out. His Horizon colleagues followed. The council voted to establish a committee exploring Catherine's alternative approach. Both Rebecca and Brandon appointed as members, ensuring all perspectives represented. As people filed out, Rebecca stood separate from the dispersing crowd. Looking up at the October stars, Christopher joined her. You were magnificent in there. 69 years of silence. And I step into the light with a property dispute. Very dignified. You gave them truth. That took courage. Brandon approached. Hesitant, stopped a few feet away. You're Rebecca Richards' daughter. I am. And you loaned me money to stop my foreclosure, even though we've never met. Your family. Whether you knew it or not, Brandon's composure fractured. I can't. This is all so overwhelming. I know, he laughed. Sharp, bitter. My grandfather had a secret daughter for 69 years. She owns the most valuable part of the farm, and she just saved me from bankruptcy, while I was trying to sell her birthright to a corporation. Yeah, overwhelming covers it. Rebecca stepped closer. Richard loved you, loved all his grandchildren, but he also loved me. And he found a way to protect both families, even if it meant keeping us apart. Why? Why keep it secret so long? Because sometimes the secrets we keep aren't about shame. They're about protecting the people we love from pain we can't prevent. The words hung there. Truth neither comfortable nor simple. Catherine appeared with coffee from a nearby diner that stayed open late for council meetings. Thought you might need this? They stood together. 4 people connected by blood and land, and a man who'd loved them all enough to keep them separate, until the separation itself became the problem, until the only solution was truth, however messy, however late. The next morning, Christopher woke to pounding on his apartment door. Sheriff Garrett, looking grim. We've got a problem. What kind? The arson kind. Someone torched the old homestead last night. Christopher's stomach dropped. They drove to the property. Fire trucks still there. Smoke rising, the farmhouse. Richard's sanctuary, the place Rebecca had just visited. Damaged, not totally destroyed. The stone foundation remained, some walls. But the interior, the study, Richard's journal, gone burned beyond recovery. Catherine stood near her car. Face pale, I came to take measurements for the restoration budget. Found it like this. Rebecca emerged from the tree line. Walking slowly, she'd been here, watching it burn. Christopher went to her. I'm so sorry. 69 years. I finally see my father's refuge, the place he protected. And 2 days later, someone burns it. Garrett's investigating. We both know who's behind this. Knowing and proving are different things. Rebecca turned to face him. They're trying to scare us. Make us give up. Walk away. Is it working? She looked at the smoking ruins. Richard spent his entire life protecting this land. This water. These 40 acres. He gave up his daughter. Kept secrets that broke his heart. All to preserve something bigger than himself. Her voice hardened. I'm not letting some developer burn that legacy because he lost a zoning vote. Catherine joined them. The barn's still intact. Richard's equipment collection. The antique plow where you found the key. All safe and the springs untouched. The water's still flowing. Rebecca straightened. Then we rebuild, better than before. We turn this act of destruction, into something that proves why this place matters. Garrett approached, found accelerant traces. Gasoline, deliberately set. But no witnesses, no cameras out here. What about Whitfield? Has an alibi. Was at a Rotary dinner in Lincoln. 50 witnesses, he hired someone, probably. But proving it, that's harder. Christopher's phone buzzed unknown number. He answered, a voice. Male. Unfamiliar. You should have taken the deal. Now things get complicated. Who is this? Someone who doesn't like his time wasted. Horizon invested millions in this project. We're not walking away because some old man's bastard daughter showed up with paperwork. Threatening us won't change the council vote. The council. Please. There are other ways to acquire property. Eminent domain. Environmental violations. Suddenly discovered easements. We have lawyers. Resources. Patience. And we have the truth. The truth. The truth is that rural Nebraska is dying. You're just too sentimental to see it. This farm. This town. They're finished. We're offering you a chance to profit from the inevitable. Smart people take it. We're not smart people. No. You're stubborn people. And stubbornness has consequences. The line went dead. Christopher looked at the burned homestead, at Rebecca. Standing straight, refusing to bend, at Catherine. Already sketching plans for rebuilding, at Garrett, taking photos. Building a case he might never prove. And he understood. This wasn't about a farm anymore. It wasn't even about water rights or inheritance law. This was about whether powerful interests could simply take what they wanted, or whether regular people, armed with nothing but truth and stubbornness, could stand against them. Richard had bet on the latter, had spent 69 years protecting 40 acres he'd never personally profit from. For a daughter he couldn't claim, for a future he'd never see. Now that bet was theirs to honor or abandon. Christopher looked at Rebecca. You said you're not walking away, not a chance. Catherine, I've got 3 grant applications ready to submit. Rebuilding the homestead is now part of the historical preservation component. Brandon, his cousin, appeared from examining the barn. That loan Rebecca gave me. I'm donating it back to the rebuilding fund. If we're doing this, we're all in. Christopher felt something shift. Not confidence exactly, but certainty. They'd fight, however long it took, whatever it cost, because some things are worth more than money, worth fighting to preserve for those who will come long after we're gone. Richard's words. Now their responsibility. Christopher pulled out his phone, called the fire restoration company Lawrence had recommended. How fast can you get a crew out here? Rebecca's hand on his shoulder. We rebuild. Tomorrow, not 2 weeks later. Tomorrow, because that's what you do when someone tries to burn down your legacy. You build it back, stronger, and standing in that valley, with smoke still rising from Richard's sanctuary, with 3 generations of Fosters finally united. Christopher understood what his grandfather had really left him. Not land, not money, but the chance to prove that some legacies can't be destroyed by fire, some truths can't be buried by secrets, and some families, once broken by time and circumstance, can heal if given the courage to try.